Welcome everyone to the Over Under Movies podcast, the show where we take a prominent figure or franchise in the world of filmmaking and ask the simple question, are they overrated or are they underrated? My name is DeAngelis. I'm joined as always by my co-host. He is the Larry Benson to my Erwin Mayfair. Those are the
two guys.
Yeah, the two tech guys.
And which one are you?
By the way, if anybody calls me David Cross in the comments, you're fucking banned, okay? This is your first and only warning.
And that hasn't happened to you on this channel, right?
It's happened on my main channel.
I see.
I swear to God if it bleeds over. It's Mr. Jason Gong. Jason, how you doing?
Right. Hello. I'm doing great, Dylan. How are you?
I'm solid. This is one of our classic Friday night recording sessions here.
Mm-hmm.
This is an exciting one. Today we're talking about Small Soldiers, which is a 1998 film. It's a movie that is very near and dear to my heart personally. It's a film that I liked a lot when I was a kid. It's a film that I watched a lot when I was in college, and then we rewatched it last weekend. I think this movie is fucking awesome. I love it so much. However, this is going to be a personal journey of copium for me in this podcast because nobody else likes this movie. This movie made like no money at the box office. It's got poor critic and audience reviews if you look at it online. It has no like lasting legacy of film franchise, and there was a reboot that was like canceled when Disney bought Fox, what we'll talk about. But this is a movie that just kind of like it happened.
Yep.
And I absolutely love it, and I don't understand why this movie doesn't have a lasting legacy to it. I don't know. Had you watched this movie before we watched it last weekend?
Yes, I had caught this on TV as a child. I think they even might have like played it in school at some point, and I probably rented it from Blockbuster once or twice, but it was not one of my repeat watches. It didn't have like that near and dear to my heart feeling that it does for you. So I was going into this a little bit more objectively and more fresh than you were.
And what did you think about it on rewatch here?
It's a good movie. I think the thing that makes it stand out is how weird and unique it is. It's like kind of crazy from the concept to the execution. It's a little bit off the walls. And to me, that makes it feel pretty special. I can see critics like initially just not understanding it, and audiences too. Like the premise of this movie is that these two scientist dudes make toy lines, and one guy kind of designs a military G.I. Joe knockoff toy line that's just designed to hunt down monsters, and the other guy designs the monsters, and the guy who designs the monsters is like a pacifist, kind of a wussy, so the monsters end up being programmed to just run and hide all the time. So it's about this war between these two factions of toys and this little boy who gets caught up in the middle, and he's trying to help the monster toys, and it's pretty bonkers.
Yeah, one of the toy designers, he kind of goes around the other guy's back and specs in munitions-grade military microchips to be put in the toys, which gives them sentience, basically.
Yes.
As the one scientist guy says, it's not artificial intelligence, it's actual intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're just sentient, basically. So you have these toys that are basically alive running around, and you have this group of people, mostly Alan Abernathy, who's played by Gregory Smith. He is trying to like solve this problem because he gets like a shipment of toys early at his dad's toy shop, and the toys like basically like destroy the shop and they break out, and he's stuck having to like find the toys. Mm-hmm. And then by the end of the movie, it's like it's all out war. This is like kind of a war movie.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, I think this was probably pitched like Toy Story meets a war movie. I think this movie got made off the success of Toy Story, where whoever greenlit this was like, okay, kids like stories about toys coming to life, so we'll do that. And then they were like, but what if it was like badass? What if it was an action movie?
Yeah,
and it was cool.
Yeah, from what I was reading online, so this movie is directed by Joe Dante, who is an interesting director on his own. He might warrant like his own episode at some point here, because he's one of those directors where he really got disillusioned by the like the film, corporation system, and he made a film in the 80s called Gremlins, which made a ton of money, and it was like really revered, and basically the studio was like, you need to make another Gremlins movie. Like, this movie made way too much money. We need a sequel. And he was like, no, the first Gremlins movie ended perfectly. It doesn't warrant a sequel. So he made a sequel in Gremlins 2, which we've talked about maybe doing Gremlins for our Christmas episode this year. Gremlins 2 is incredible because it's like a giant middle finger to the studio. It's kind of like Matrix 4 a little bit.
Oh, interesting.
Where it comes off as a director who actively did not want to make a sequel to their movie, but the studio was like, we're going to make this with or without you. So he just made like a ridiculous movie where like the villain of the film basically is the film corporation. It's very interesting. Gremlins 2 is awesome. Check it out.
Cool.
For anybody that hasn't watched it. Anyway, he did Small Soldiers here. Small Soldiers had no previous like IP to it. This is not based on a toy line, even though obviously the Commando Elites look like G.I. Joes. I think there was like a lawsuit by G.I. Joe that they had to settle because of like the similarity between them. But that's, you know, the monsters aren't based off anything. And you would think that at minimum they would sell like a lot of toys for this movie, and it just did not hit the way they wanted it to hit.
Right.
I saw some interviews with Joe Dante talking about how, the target audience, they weren't exactly sure what they wanted from it, whether they wanted to target like edgy teenagers or they wanted to target children. Yeah. Which would be the type of people, you know, the age demographic that would be playing with toys like this.
Right. Yeah, there's like a good horror movie in here about toys that come to life and then try to kill you. And I think Gremlins doesn't suffer from the same thing, but has a similar thing where I think most people watch Gremlins as a kid, but that's an R-rated movie, right?
I'm not sure. In the 80s, it probably wasn't rated R, but it's dark. Yeah. Like, there are dark elements to it.
Yeah, so it seems like this guy is like, that's what he enjoys, is like creating these movies that are dark and violent, but having like children as protagonists, you know, making them stories about growing up, all of that. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting movie. I think it's successful in what it's trying to do. Obviously, you do as well. But I could see why it didn't click with some people.
Yeah, it's something we talked about like while we were watching it, and we were like, well, the characters are getting stabbed a lot in this. Like, there's a lot of blood.
Yeah, they get stabbed and then they just like walk off like it's nothing.
It's my favorite part of this rewatch, at least specifically, is how much I recognized how the Commando Elites were basically like expert engineers in turning like home appliances into weapons.
Yeah.
And vehicles. Like, it was fucking awesome.
I think that was like one of the coolest parts. I think when we were watching it, I compared it to the show Kids Next Door. Have you seen that show?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very similar technology, like treehouse that turns into a mech technology, which is always a lot of fun to watch because it's like a kid's imagination with like a military experts, engineering expertise, and it was just cool to see.
So just getting into the cast here, I already mentioned Gregory Smith, who plays Alan Abernathy. He's like a loner, and he doesn't get along with the other kids at school. He talks about he's been kicked out of like 3 different high schools or something like that due to bad behavior. His like love interest / crush is Christy Fimple, who is played by Kirsten Dunst. I guess like 2 or 3 years later, she'll be in Spider-Man. So this is like right before her big break. And then the 2 scientists, you got Jay Moore plays Larry Benson, David Cross plays Erwin Mayfair, Dennis Leary plays the CEO of Globotech, and Dick Miller, who is like one of the most prolific character actors ever. Go to Dick Miller's IMDb. It's like fucking absurd. He plays the guy that gives the toys to Alan. And then for the voices, we have Franklin Jella plays Archer, and Tommy Lee Jones plays Major Chip Hazard. So this is a year after Men in Black. So this is like Tommy Lee Jones, like really like pushing into the mainstream. Also, so just some like interesting fun facts here about the voices. There are these evil Barbies that Chrissy has that are called Gwendy dolls. And the Gwendy dolls are voiced by Sarah Michelle Gellar and Christina Ricci. Yeah. Which is pretty funny. Another fun fact I saw was that all of the Gorgonites are voiced by actors from This Is Spinal Tap.
Oh, that's so funny.
And all of the Commando Elites, except for Tommy Lee Jones and I think one other guy, are voiced by actors from The Dirty Dozen, which is a war movie from the 60s.
Right. Yeah, I saw that they wanted to do stunt casting for those roles. I read that initially they were trying to get the voice actors from Predator to be the Commando Elites, so it would have been like Arnold Schwarzenegger and his crew from that movie.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, because another thing that really stands out in this film, and it's probably like the main thing that a lot of movie critics like focused on, was the special effects. Special effects in this movie are incredible, and it's a lot of miniature work, obviously, because they're toys, but there's also a lot of like really good CGI that I think holds up really well nowadays, considering it was made in 1998. Stan Winston did all of the miniature work for this film. Stan Winston is like absolutely legendary in the special effects space. He worked a lot with Spielberg, Cameron, so he worked on Terminator, he worked on the Jurassic Park films, he did The Thing, so The Thing is like probably the most famous practical special effects movie ever made. That was Stan Winston. He worked on this movie, and I think they look great. And there was a lot of sequences in the movie where we were like, is this CGI? Is this practical? And it's seamless, and that's like the mark of like, you know, really good direction, special effects.
You and I spend a lot of time when we watch these movies asking, how did they do that? And anytime they clearly stump us, then that means it's good special effects. And I think that happened a lot in this movie. There were some parts where you could see that it was CGI, but the CGI looked great. You know, it's challenging to make anything that's combination animation, live action. You know, Mary Poppins did it with like 2D animation or whatever, but like making animation that feels integrated into the world of the live action around it is really hard. That's why like Toy Story, all the people are cartoons as well. Like it's just hard to do.
Yeah, and it seems like the mix of animated characters and real life characters, it didn't look like they were trying to like edit around it or anything like that. There's a sequence where Christy is getting like jumped by all of her Gwendy dolls, and they're like jumping all over her. And I gotta imagine that was like a nightmare for the special effects people, and it looks great even now.
Yeah, I know how they do it, but I don't know how they do it. Like, it's very impressive.
And there's also a lot of like wide shots, which are really impressive. There's one shot near the end of the movie where there's like a complete army of the Commando Elites, because the main Tommy Lee Jones one, he breaks into a toy factory and he just gets a shitload of them, and like they're just rolling up on this house, and they're just everywhere. And it's like a super wide shot of like the front lawn of somebody's house, and those are all CGI characters, and it looks really good. I'm sure the vehicles and some of the other stuff are practical. Yeah, like what a puzzle for them to have to solve there. And even the critics that don't like this movie, I think they really focus on the special effects as being like a highlight of it.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, you got to give props where it's due.
So why did this not become a franchise? Is it really as simple as it didn't make enough money for them to like really, you know, keep going with it?
Yeah, so I'm guessing that they made a decent amount of money in home rentals, even merch sales, stuff that we don't really have figures for. But I just think that maybe as an IP, the characters weren't distinct enough. Like the Commando guys, they're just G.I. Joe knockoffs.
That's true.
So it's hard to like make them the face of your franchise. And then I guess if it wasn't clicking with audiences at the time, then it just wasn't ever going to be a thing. I also read like the pitch for the reboot that got canned, and it was like about a toy factory or something.
Yeah, it was called Toymageddon, and it took place in a toy factory.
Yeah. It seemed cool, and they were working on it in like 2010. It wasn't like we're trying to do a sequel to this movie. It was like years and years later where they wanted to revive this. So this is definitely in a bucket somewhere with Hollywood executives being like, all right, I want to reboot a franchise. What do we have in the bucket? And this is one of them.
This is one of those IPs that they could pull out at any given time if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Fox was acquired by Disney, so this would be Disney that would be doing the Small Soldiers reboot if it happened. I think the Gorgonites are definitely really unique looking. I think any potential sequel to this movie, though, falls under the same... It's the same trap that Gremlins 2 has, where this movie wraps up really great, where you have the Gorgonites, they set sail in the toy boat down the river, and they're going off to whatever their homeworld is supposed to be, that they think it is, and that's it. And Alan, he starts dating Kirsten Dunst. He seems like he's having a good time. I love the end of this movie where there's just like crazy amounts of destruction to this suburban neighborhood.
Yeah.
And everyone's yelling at Dennis Leary, like, you got to make this right, bro. All right, look at my house. Like, look at the emotional damage here. And he has his assistant just cutting checks for people.
Yeah.
And they just one by one go, oh okay, we're good.
Yeah, that's a great ending. It's really interesting because like that CEO is ostensibly the villain of the film. It's his like corporate greed that leads to this destruction, but there is no comeuppance for him at all.
It's incredibly realistic.
Yeah. And it's funny, and it feels, I mean, you're probably not supposed to root for that guy. He's a bad guy, but it feels cool to watch him do those power plays, and it feels like cool to watch these middle-class suburb people get rich because of what they endured. So I don't know. Not a lot of lessons to be learned from the ending of this movie, but it is a really cool and distinct ending.
Another thing I would say is this movie kind of makes you nostalgic for toy shops.
Oh, yeah.
Alan's dad owns like a classic toy shop, and that's just something, especially nowadays, is just completely fallen by the wayside. If you did like a reboot of this film franchise, you'd be like, oh my god, it's like classic toy shops. But this is something that was like a thing in the late 90s.
Yeah. Not only are classic toy shops gone, we don't have chain toy stores anymore.
Toys R Us is dead.
It's all over. Like, corporate greed has led to the destruction of both mom and pop shops and Toys R Us, which was like a massive behemoth. It's terrible.
Yeah, the real sequel to this movie is Alan's dad's toy shop closed up in 2003. Right?
Yeah. If they did a sequel to this movie, I have a feeling it would be someone trying to revive these toy lines in the world of like Roblox or Minecraft or something. I think it would be a digital version of these toys that the kids are interacting with in some way. And I don't think it would be very good.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not friends with any small children. Also, none of our friends have small children, so I can't speak on our kids playing with action figures nowadays. I'm sure they have to be, right? No, they can't all just be on iPads.
No, they're all on iPads, dude. I don't know. Let me think. I have like little cousins and stuff. It's pretty Roblox heavy. Like,
crazy.
They still have like stuffed animals and stuff, but action figures, I don't see kids playing with.
Oh, man. Action figures are goated. Like,
I agree. I don't disagree.
I had a Chip Hazard toy when I was a kid. I don't know what happened to it, but I remembered having one.
I had the stupid comedian from the Gorgonites, the guy who like spins around. He's purple and he cracks jokes.
Oh yeah.
Burger King put these in their
Burger King toy line,
Mighty Kids meals or whatever they were called at the time. It was controversial. This is the only PG-13 film that Burger King did Happy Meals for, or like had tie-ins for, because they thought it was going to be rated PG. And they had already made the toys, and there was this whole controversy. People wouldn't bat an eye today, but back then, some parents were upset that there were toys from a PG-13 movie in their kids' meals.
This movie did have 4 video games that were tied into it.
That's crazy.
We need to get back to the old days of video game tie-ins to movies that are in theaters.
I agree. Tell me some of the ones you've played. You've played a Monsters, Inc. one.
I have played a Monsters, Inc. one. There was an Aladdin one for Sega Dreamcast that I remember. I played one that was it was a platformer for the original X-Men game back in 2000, tie-in for the movie.
Sweet.
I think that there was a Jungle Book one that I remember playing. There was a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Super Nintendo game that was like an arcade-style game that I remember playing a lot. There's some good ones out there. Lion King. I played a Lion King game.
I never got past the second level of Lion King.
Yeah.
Do you remember the second level? It's the I just can't wait to be king sequence, and you're jumping across the giraffes.
That's what's great about 80s and 90s video games is that
they're impossible.
No matter how bad they are, they're really difficult.
Yeah.
Because there's no DLC back then. There was no patches to add in like extra content. So what they did instead was they just made it really fucking difficult.
Yeah,
you'd be playing the game forever.
They made a 40-minute game that took years to beat because children can't beat those games. It's what gave Angry Video Game Nerd a career, is those types of video games.
Yeah, it's great. I know the Lion King one specifically is like notorious for its difficulty.
Yeah, I did eventually.
Hilarious, the Lion King game.
I found like a version of it where you could just skip to whatever level you wanted. And the level where you finally fight Scar is much easier.
Lion King Kingdom Hearts 2 level.
It's great.
That's pretty good too.
Yeah. What are we talking about? Video game tie-ins and how... Okay, so there's 4 video games you're telling me for small soldiers?
There were 4 video games
Why?
specifically made for small soldiers. I didn't write down like all of them.
What platforms?
I'm sure they're all bad. It was a mix of like PlayStation 1 and PC.
I could see myself having like fun on a PS1 version of this game. Yeah, I think that.
I bet the soundtrack would be good. We haven't talked about the soundtrack yet for this movie, but it kind of slaps.
They put a lot of money into this soundtrack.
It's a lot of like war movie tracks, and then there's just some like other like random bops, like Tom Sawyer by Rush is in here.
They have Under Pressure by Queen and David Bowie. You know that had to cost like $1 million to include that.
Yeah, so I mean, shout out to Joe Dante, who was just probably like, no, we're getting the good stuff for this movie. Film's also it's made by Amblin Entertainment, so Steven Spielberg's an executive producer for this. This movie kind of feels Spielbergian to an extent. I really like that the tone is like weird as it is. I think it gives it that like novelty that you don't see in a lot of like modern movies. Yeah. Films nowadays are so safe.
Yeah.
They're so market tested.
This is definitely something that's a lot of different things in one thing. Like the main kid's relationship with Archer is very like ET-esque, where he has to hide him sometimes, and he's this weird creature, and he just wants him to be safe. Like, I could see the Spielberg sort of elements there. And then, like you said, in many ways, it's a war movie, which is crazy. There's also like a very strong like romantic subplot throughout this movie, which I think a lot of, like, if they were going to make this today, I think they just wouldn't have that. And the romance is good. Like, it's, you know, it's cliched. The kid saves Kirsten Dunst.
Yeah, he saves the popular girl, and her boyfriend like gets like set on fire with his pants down.
Her boyfriend attempts to save her, set on fire with his pants down, and runs away. So then you're like, boo, that guy
and that
sucks.
is the last time we see him in the movie. He does not come back.
And then the main kid saves her, and she's like, you saved me. And then they kiss, and then it's like, yeah, this is classic romance in movies. But it was good. We don't see that as much anymore.
Yeah, we need more romance in our kids' films.
Yeah. It's got romance, it's got action, it's got like a boy and his weird creature that he has to protect.
Yeah, now that you mention it, the relationship between him and Archer is really interesting because Archer comes off as such like a mature character, even though he's a toy. Mm-hmm. The only other film that I can like compare this to is another film I liked a lot when I was a kid, which is called Indian in the Cupboard.
Very similar.
Which I don't know how well Indian in the Cupboard holds up nowadays.
I'm not even sure we can say its name.
Yeah. Does that movie? I don't know if that movie is canceled or we're gonna get canceled for mentioning it. One of the most iconic VHS sleeves of all time because it had like a little key that you opened to.
That's cool as shit, dude. I never owned it. I only rented it.
Oh yeah. It had like a shell that like opened up like a book.
I want that.
And then like there's like a little key that you would pop open to.
If we ever get big enough for you people to send us gifts, please gift us a copy of Indian in the Cupboard.
The VHS of Indian in the Cupboard. I think it was a gold one too. It was really cool. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Indian in the Cupboard is a film about a little toy Native American that comes to life as well. And that's done not with the same level of special effects prowess.
It's just a guy.
It's just a guy that they're just like superimposing him on like a miniature house. But yeah, kind of similar situation where it's a kid and like a little like toy miniature person. The relationship between the toys and the humans in this movie is it's very interesting. And also I like when the toy makers kind of become part of the action at the end of the movie. Mm-hmm. And you see David Cross's character speaking to the Gorgonites. Mm-hmm. He's like, I am your god. I designed you.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh my god, it's the maker.
It's great because that's a whole other aspect of the film that we didn't really mention is that it's like a corporate sci-fi type of movie about this guy or these two guys who make toys come to life, and then it follows their story too. Yeah, spoilers for this podcast, but I have to say it's overrated. And I'll probably be complaining a little bit about how much focus those guys get. It is definitely, they're swinging for the fences here with everything they're cramming in.
Yeah. If I can say one negative about the movie, it's a little long. Mm-hmm. It's like almost 2 hours.
Yeah, it's an hour 50. Yeah.
And I feel like maybe if the film was like 15, 20 minutes shorter, maybe that would be more appealing to children. Mm-hmm. But like overall, I have like no major qualms with the movie. And looking at the critics' reviews of this film, it's kind of stumps me a little bit because it's a lot of critics saying, I don't understand the tone. I don't understand who this is for. And I remember when I was a kid being like, this is cool. This is like an edgy kids movie. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's just something that didn't resonate with movie critics. It's always funny when you look at films with this type of tone and this like this premise is completely silly, and then you see like Roger Ebert like reviewing it as seriously as he would like Titanic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what are some other movies that fit this tone? I would say Gremlins is one of them, but can you think of anything else? Like
movies that are like weirdly dark, but for kids,
or like you don't know, or like the premise feels like it's for kids, but it's PG-13.
Well, I feel like it's a lot of movies that came out of like the 80s and 90s that were like specifically doing something to this. I mean, I don't know. One that comes to my head is like Labyrinth.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Which is like a really fucking weird movie, and like it kind of PDF file centric, right?
That's true.
With David Bowie and Jennifer Connelly, but it's marketed as a kids movie, technically speaking. What's the one with the? Oh my! I haven't seen this movie. The one where the horse dies in the mud pit. What movie is that?
A Never-Ending Story.
Never-Ending Story.
I haven't seen that either, so we could be wrong about the title of this movie.
No, I think it's Never-Ending Story. But yeah, there's just like a lot of movies in the 80s and 90s where they kind of went like dark with it. That movies nowadays just they are not interested in that. They're trying to keep it nice and like straight and narrow. Keep with your market research.
Yeah, I watched a movie today called Thelma the Unicorn.
Oh yeah? How was that?
It was terrible. It was so bad. It's the most generic movie I've ever seen. I should be nicer. It's a movie for children that plays it safe.
It's directed by Jared Hess.
Yeah.
You told me, you were like, hey, you really like Napoleon Dynamite. Napoleon Dynamite's in like my Letterboxd top 4. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. We'll probably do a Napoleon Dynamite episode at some point on this pod. And I've always wanted to like dive into like Jared Hess's other stuff because I think Nacho Libre, which is another one of his movies, super underrated in hindsight. And you were like, "Yeah, we're watching a Jared Hess movie." And I come to our TV room and I see this fucking animated unicorn, and I go, "Hey, you guys watched the movie yet?" And you go, "Bro, this is the movie." I'm like, I gotta go.
That movie, yeah, it's super generic. We're not here to talk about it. I can't do it. When we do our Jared Hess episode, then I'll talk about that movie.
Are you caught up with The Boys yet?
Episode 4 came out yesterday, so I'm not caught up on that one, but I'm on the first 3. Did you watch the new one?
Yeah. It's funny enough, like I'm watching The Boys and The Acolyte back to back now.
Oh, interesting.
Because I think both of them had their episode 4s yesterday.
Okay.
So I'm kind of watching them together. Very, very different vibes coming from those. Maybe we'll do like a special TV pod here.
Yeah.
Talk about. I know I mentioned us possibly getting our Star Wars crew back together to do Acolyte because the conversation around Acolyte is very interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm someone who's like always been pushing for like an old like Republic type story for Star Wars, and I just don't think they're hitting this for this. But unfortunately, like any Star Wars show or movie, like it's like sexism, racism, all the shit. So you kind of got to be like walking on your tiptoes a little bit when you criticize it because you don't want to be lumped in with those folks.
I know. It's so hard because Star Wars is really boring and lame now, but also the people who hate it the most are just...
They suck.
Yeah. Like I just
everybody sucks here.
I want to be able to say that this Star Wars show is not that good without getting lumped in with those people too, but whatever. Did you see they changed Ki-Adi-Mundi's birthday?
Yeah, I didn't even know who that character was until people started like complaining about it online.
It's so funny.
Though that's like, I mean, like brief Acolyte like episode 1 to 4 review here. The series is set 100 years before the prequels. They should have made it 1,000 years. Make it so that nobody from the prequels is alive when this series is happening, and make the world look completely different than the universe that we are seeing in the prequels. Because Coruscant, like all of the locations that they have, it just looks like the prequels. It looks exactly the same. There's no difference.
Yeah, I don't know.
Weird artistic decision. Interestingly enough, the showrunner for that is Leslie Headland, who
we've done directed a film
that we did on this podcast, Sleeping with Other People,
which Dylan really doesn't like. So it kind of makes sense that you wouldn't like The Acolyte.
Yeah, I don't know.
But also, there's like no through line between Sleeping with Other People and The Acolyte.
I know. I remember when I was looking at her IMDb page, I was like, she's doing a Star Wars show?
Yeah. Anyway, why'd you ask if I was watching The Boys? Was that related to this?
No, I was just curious.
Okay.
I'm just spitting here.
Yeah.
Anyway, objective rating for Small Soldiers. We're doing Letterboxd ratings now, right?
We're not doing this segment anymore. Yeah. What does Letterboxd say? Do you have it?
I don't know. You got it? You got your app on lock? Well, Jason's pulling up his Letterboxd app. This would be a good time to remind everyone that we have Letterboxd bot integration in our Discord server. Please join our Discord server if you want to come talk movies with us. You can also log in your own personal Letterboxd in that server. So anytime you review a movie, it'll pop in our feed there so we can always see what everybody's watching. Anyway, Jason, what's the Letterboxd for Small Soldiers?
It's got a 3.2.
3.2. So, yeah, it's interesting. That's what that comes out to like a 6.5, right? Yeah, or 6.4.
Yeah.
So that's higher than Rotten Tomatoes has a 49% critic score and a 45% audience score. So it's not even like the audience score is lower than the critic score
That's
on Rotten
crazy.
Tomatoes. So it was very, very, very confusing. But yeah, 3.2 out of 5 is our objective rating here. You gotta do overrated?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so Jason, you have the job of arguing that Small Soldiers, film from 1998, is overrated. What is the pitch?
Well, you said up front that like audiences, kids didn't really gel with this. And I actually, and this isn't super related to my argument, but when I was at that bachelor party a couple weeks ago, we were talking about
flexing his bachelor parties.
we were talking
We
about
went to Top Golf.
we did go to Top Golf. It was fun. Shout out to Top Golf. Please sponsor our podcast. We were talking about how movies that everyone loves gets rebooted and how we would like it if movies that people either didn't like but liked the premise or just kind of liked but forgot about, if those could get rebooted instead, because we don't need good movies to get rebooted. We already have those movies. And one of the movies that someone else brought up was Small Soldiers. And then like everyone in the group was like, hey, I remember that movie. That's a good movie. So at least there's a couple other guys in Delco who remember Small Soldiers and like it.
Shout out to Delco, friend of the pod.
Shout out Delco, dude. Did you see they're making like a new Fox animated cartoon that's set in Delco?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it looks awful. I shouldn't be so mean because I think it's like someone's like first, it's obviously someone's dream to get this thing made, but the commercial is not good. I'll send it to you later.
It's not like super right-wing or anything like that, right?
I don't think so, but the characters all have like a Delco accent and they're just dumb. I don't know. Like it comes on right after like Bob's Burgers, The Simpsons, and Family Guy. This is trying to be the next one of those cartoons.
That's interesting.
And it's representing us. And it doesn't seem to be doing a good job.
We'll have to do a review of that when it comes out to see its Delco accuracy.
We should get all our Delcoist friends. Let's not invite anyone who lives in Philly with us. Only people who live in Delco that we know.
Yeah.
Let's get our parents on. Okay. Anyway, Small Soldiers. I will say I did like this movie. I had a great time watching it, but I remember having been endeared by it more when I was a kid. I think one thing that I remembered being better than it actually was like the relationship between the main kid and Archer. When I was watching it this time, I never really felt that they had like a super special connection. He was always just kind of hiding the toy away, or the toy would just like be not helpful in spite of being like this supposedly wise figure from the Gorgonite culture. He just wasn't that interesting or cool. And their relationship wasn't really like Elliot and E.T., and it felt kind of underwritten. So I didn't find myself like really rooting for the Gorgonites because of the relationship between the main kid and them in that way that I expected to. I thought that, maybe Archer would help this kid overcome like some of his past struggles and trauma. Like the kid got expelled from several schools previously. Maybe he would open up about why to this toy, and that would build a bond between them. But that doesn't really happen. The kid just kind of decides that he's on the Gorgonite side and does his best to help them.
Now, Alan is stuck kind of figuring things out on his own in this movie.
Yeah.
Because like his parents aren't helpful. The Gorgonites are just hiding.
Yeah. So I was disappointed, I guess you could say, by like just the portrayal of the Gorgonites and the lack of relationship building between them and the main kid. I'll say that, like you said, this movie is too long, at an hour 50 or 2 hours. It's just too long for a kid's action movie. There's almost like two climaxes in this. There's a chase scene where the commandos are chasing down Kirsten Dunst and the main kid, and then the commandos get blown up and lit on fire, and you're like, I guess the movie's ending. And that's when the main commando goes back to the toy shop and recruits a whole army, and then there's a whole second climax where they're fighting that army. And that goes on for like that. They have some really creative elements in that sequence. But it does go on for a little bit long. Like you're ready for the movie to end at that point. I think that the focus on the two scientists is kind of unnecessary. I think showing them up front and then maybe at the very end would be fine. But we keep cutting back to them and they're just like, they're not adding anything, especially like at first when you're cutting back to them. It's kind of funny when they show up at their house and then you get to see interactions between like all of the human characters. It's a little bit fun, but everything that they're in before that feels really unnecessary and just pads out the movie that did not need padding. Yeah, so I wouldn't say this is a bad movie by any metric. I think it's a really good movie, but I think there's just enough elements of this that fall flat and that I found disappointing on this rewatch, where I would say that it's just something that doesn't hold up the way it does in like our memories of as watching it as children. It's just not as good as we remember it.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, for sure. You know, the underrated argument, I think, kind of writes itself. This is the type of movie that would like immediately come to mind when we talk about like the premise of this podcast, because it's a movie that did not make a lot of money at the box office. It is not loved particularly by critics or audiences from the time. However, it's a very good movie. It's well crafted. The direction is really solid. It's got good performances. Something we haven't talked about here is that this is largely a cast of like comedy actors that he has in here. Like Dennis Leary's a comedian. This movie was the last film role for Phil Hartman,
R.I.P.
who's a SNL cast member who was murdered by his wife right before this movie premiered, which is very unfortunate. So the movie's like loaded with comedians and like child actors. And he's, you know, Joe Dante's getting like good performances out of them for this action film, for this film that like gets pretty serious at times. This has like incredible special effects that hold up nowadays. It has an incredible score. The premise is fucking bonkers. And if you're going to get me to watch a movie that's like old, that is underappreciated, it's got to have a bonkers premise. It's got to be something weird. And this movie hits that weird factor. If you've never seen this movie, you're going to watch it and go, what the hell am I watching? This is insanely 90s. And I just think it's great. And I think it's a movie that holds up really well. There's some 90s movies that do not hold up and we're stuck clinging to nostalgia. Shout out to our Mighty Morphin Power Rangers podcast, which special effects do not hold up in that movie, but we do not care.
Yeah, I gave that movie 5 stars.
Yeah, that's a 5-star movie for other reasons. Have you seen the discourse online comparing the two Power Rangers movies? I retweeted it on our Twitter account.
I saw.
The number of people going to bat for the 2017 Power Rangers. You gotta put your real faces in your profile pictures, all right? Don't be hiding behind your anime profile pics, all right?
It's crazy.
Say it with your chest. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers is so much better. I saw one person tweet like, give me one example of a character that goes through a transformation in the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie, and the response should be like, who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
It's a fucking Power Rangers movie.
I was actually going to retweet that with our podcast account with just that picture of Bugs Bunny saying no. I didn't. I might still do that later. Yeah, very... I know that there are people who go to bat for that 2017 movie, and I love them for that. I think you should go to bat for any Power Rangers property, but the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie is so much more fun to watch.
I mean, listen, all film is subjective. People are totally free to like bad movies.
Yeah.
There are plenty of film fans out there that build their entire personality around liking bad movies. People are just wrong. People on Twitter are wrong.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, Small Soldiers is super underrated, and it was one of the first films I thought of when we were starting this podcast. It's a film that I've wanted to talk about for a long time here because it is a movie that I liked a lot when I was a kid, and watching it as an adult, it really holds up, and it gives a level of nostalgia for a world that just does not exist anymore.
Yeah.
Which is a world of people that love toys.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that's just gone. It's never coming back. This is a film that's like largely devoid of electronics. In fact, the people that have the high tech, the TV and the sound system and stuff are Kirsten Dunst's parents, and they're kind of like painted as like not necessarily bad guys, but like we don't like them.
Right.
They're painted as weird. Like Phil Hartman, the first time you see him, he's like cutting down a tree branch to put up a giant satellite dish, which is good foreshadowing because that satellite dish comes back at the very end of the movie and saves the Gorgonites.
Yep.
Which is cool. It all comes back around. Really like fairly tight script, even though, like we said, it's a little long.
Yeah, I think it's just a tight premise, which lends itself to a tight script. There's not a lot that you have to do to make a movie like this. You just have to introduce the two factions and have the kid help the one faction, and then that's the movie. I think they added too much to this, and that helps my overrated argument.
This movie does also have a very good movie cat, Alan's cat, when it's playing with the different Gorgonites.
Yeah.
Great sequences.
I think that's a good way. Anytime you have like a kid bonding with a small creature as the center of your movie, just add a cat in there too, and it'll help. It'll go a long way.
Yeah, or you could have given them like a dog and have like Archer ride the dog into battle.
Oh, that would have been sick. We should write the sequel to this.
Write the sequel to Small Soldiers.
We should stop having a podcast and just start screenwriting.
Just get into screenwriting. Yeah, screenwriting is so hard. I couldn't even imagine. Do you have any friends that are screenwriters?
Not professionally.
Where like that have written scripts?
Yeah, I've written scripts. All my friends have written scripts. Yeah, so everyone writes screenplays, Dylan.
I guess I'm left out here. Though I write books.
Yeah, you write novels. Yeah. You should write a screenplay for NaNoWriMo.
Writing a screenplay has got to be so difficult.
It's not harder than writing a novel.
But anyway, we can like wrap up here and like give our like honest thoughts here. Do you think this movie comes out like on the underrated or overrated side? 3.2 is really interesting.
Yeah,
as our
that's
baseline.
Right in the middle, kind of.
Yeah, and I think if we were closer to that like 50% range,
it'd be really easy to say it's underrated.
Really easy. Shout out to the people on Letterboxd, I guess. Like the film snobs they're on our side here.
I think it's a lot of people like us and a lot of people like you that are remembering it from their childhood.
Dudes in their 30s.
I will say I think this is underrated. Like if you haven't seen this movie before, you should check it out.
This is like go watch it.
Yeah, and I think this is like still a good movie to show your kids. That's like a really fun alternative to the type of stuff they're putting out in theaters now. Like having just watched Thelma the Unicorn, I'm like, if I have children, I want them to watch Small Soldiers. So like from the point of view that this is a movie for kids, like, yeah, it's great. And probably it isn't one that parents are showing their kids. So I would say overall it's underrated.
Yeah, it's a good movie to show to like a 15-year-old, which is it's a weird demographic where, you know, as you age out of that like kid movie phase, you immediately want to jump into the adult movies, right? There's no intermediary between the two. And I think this movie kind of like falls in the middle. Also, when I was reading about the production of this movie, Joe Dante wanted to go more over the top with like explosions and stuff like that. There was a sequence in the original script where they just like completely blew up the house at the end of the movie. Like they just exploded that thing. And the studio was like, we don't have the budget to explode a house. So we're not going to do that.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like, I think, like I said, there's a world where this is a horror movie. I could see Joe Dante wanting this to be much more violent and like silly. You know, how like Chucky is a movie about an evil toy come to life, killing people.
It's literally murdering people.
Yeah, I could see this.
The toys I don't think they murder anybody in this movie.
I don't think they get any confirmed kills. Only the commandos die.
Yeah, but some lasting injuries, and people are going to need to get some tetanus shots because they're getting just stabbed by random bladed objects from around their house.
Yeah, corn cob holders. It's wild.
Yeah, but it's good. Definitely recommend checking out Small Soldiers. It was like the 40th highest grossing movie of 1998.
That's bad.
It's crazy. Absolutely baffling. But anyway, that's going to do it for this one, guys. For myself, for Jason, we will see you next week on the Over Under Movies podcast. See the movies.
Bye.
Bye.